Hello everyone, this is my module product 4 and I'm Peyton Hatcher. Today we're examining comical themes in The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. To begin, let's look at my magic pill. Because comedy is an effective way to deliver harsher messages, Oscar Wilde's comical yet critical play, The Importance of Being Earnest, highlights the flaws in Victorian society, such as hypocrisy and ideas such as marriage, lying, and shallowness, while creating an interesting plot that subverts these themes into a more manageable form, as people will always choose what they want to hear. The connected works we'll be looking at are Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, Shallow Hal, and the literary criticism source Conformity and Resistance in Victorian Society. Now we'll look at quotes, first being The Importance of Being Earnest. These characters in the play are quite larger than life, and especially Lady Bracknell. When Jack tells Lady Bracknell of Cecily's funds, she is suddenly interested in her, as she wasn't earlier. She says, £130,000, and in the funds, Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. It's very interesting that Lady Bracknell says at the end that she regrets to say that they live in an age of surfaces, when in fact, she is one of these people that looks at surface level. Later, when Jack and Algernon are talking about marriage, Algernon says, "Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it." So this quote is one of the quotes that is examining marriage in Victorian society and is criticizing it, saying that men that are married need to have a double life, need to be lying, need to have a way to escape, because otherwise they're going to have a very tedious time in marriage. Which in the play itself seems funny, but in reality Oscar Wilde is picking at these little things that people don't seem to care about. Finally, we have another quote by Lady Bracknell. It says, "Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone." This quote is very interesting because it talks about how I believe that it talks about how the people in the audience are ignorant to these flaws in their society, or at least choose to ignore them. And then the moment that they look at it, they can't turn away. They have to look at these problems in their society. Next, we'll look at the lit crit source. This is a historical lit crit, as it's looking at Oscar Wilde during the time that he wrote the play and the people who were watching the play at the time. I think the first quote is very good. It says, "However, he manages to combine commercial success with conservative audiences, whilst mocking the very conventions that these audiences are supposed to live by. It is cleverly done so that the audience may ignore the subversive politics in the play if it chooses to." This connects back to my magic pill, as people will choose to listen if that's what they feel like doing. And that's what makes this play a great way to reach larger audiences. And although most people might choose to ignore it, Oscar Wilde is able to reach more select people that probably wouldn't have read it or wouldn't have examined these themes if it was in another form. Our next quote says, "However, Paul Watzlawick, the communication theorist, said that one cannot not communicate. Therefore, although there seems to be no message in the play, the message might be precisely that there is no message." Oscar Wilde tells us that our world is absurd and that it is pointless to try to find any meaning to it. One thing that is interesting about the play is the fact that at the end of the day, none of the problems are solved. None of the stereotypes are changed, which we'll look at when we look at Shallow Hal, how they change their mind, people change their mind, but in Oscar Wilde's play, it doesn't, which is interesting, and it seems like Oscar Wilde is trying to put a message through that. Finally, after all, Wilde himself never considered it as his best work, describing it as written by a butterfly for butterflies. However, butterflies are short-lived, whereas his play has survived for more than 100 years so far, conforming to the tastes of many different people and resisting both time and analysis. It's interesting that this play has gone on for so long, especially in that it hasn't solved many issues, it just continues to repeat them, which I think is quite interesting if you think about it. Because if it has gone on for so long, shouldn't it have fixed the very problems that it brought to the surface? Or is it just that people like to pretend that they are investigating these things when in fact they're just bringing it up to sound smarter and not doing anything about it? Now we'll look at Shallow Hal. This is a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow and Jack Black. So Jack Black's character is very shallow. As you can tell from his title, he is Shallow Hal. He only looks at women that are beautiful on the outside, and most of which are out of his league, in a sense. But finally, he gets hypnotized into only seeing people's inner beauty, and he meets a girl who he finds her to be so beautiful and falls in love with her, but he can't see that she's extremely overweight, which normally, would turn him away. So, at the beginning of the play, Shallow Hal is quite hypocritical. He wants all these very skinny, very beautiful girls, but says things like, I feel bad for people who count calories. It's no way to live. So he doesn't follow the ideals that he is looking for. Later, though, the comedy of the play comes in, and we can see when Hal can't see the way that his new girlfriend looks, but everyone else can. So later when Hal is introducing her to his best friend, he says, does she take the cake or what? And his best friend says, she takes the whole bakery, Hal. So it's somewhat dramatic irony in the sense that the audience understands the irony and all the other characters understand it, but Hal doesn't get it. But at the end of the day, he does figure out his flaws, and he is able to get over it. The hypnosis is reversed, and he can see Gwyneth in her true overweight self, but he sees the inner beauty. And so finally he learns inner beauty is the easiest thing in the world to see when you're looking for it. The brain sees what the heart wants it to feel. So in this sense, Hal is kind of like Lady Bracknell in the sense that he was originally shallow, but he takes it a step further in learning from his mistakes in the past, while Lady Bracknell does not. Finally, Brave New World. We've talked about this in earlier modules, and I think the most interesting thing to talk about in Brave New World is the fact that people that lived in the society did not seem to care about changing it. They were okay with how they lived. They ate soma. They just went along with all of the ideals that people had decided for them and didn't change when they saw a problem. They just chose to ignore it, which is similar to the audiences that watched Importance of Being Earnest. So you can choose to ignore problems, or you can choose to recognize them and try to make a change. So I thought this quote was interesting. Most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. So many of the people in Brave New World were okay with how they lived. They thought it was fine, and they didn't care to change it at all. Even though they didn't recognize it as servitude, they were happy where they were. However, his name is escaping me at the time, but the boy that came from the savages, he comes to Brave New World, and he sees all these problems, and he does not want to live that way. He says, but I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. Which is really powerful, and I believe that, if he saw the importance of being earnest, he would see these problems and run. So I think Oscar Wilde does a great job of incorporating these themes into his play and allowing people to make the decision to view the problems or just enjoy the play. But thank you for listening, and see you later.